does a sitting foreign president end up in a U.S. courtroom thousands of miles from home facing American judges and prosecutors? Not through extradition, not through diplomacy, but through a U.S. criminal indictment and a historic military operation. So how is this even possible? Let's take a closer look here on Pixel with me, Joanne Serrieh. At the center of this case is Nicolas Maduro, who U.S. prosecutors accuse of leading a narco-terrorism conspiracy. According to a federal indictment filed in New York, Maduro is accused of working with drug traffickers and armed groups to move large quantities of cocaine toward the United States. Prosecutors say this was not a political dispute. They say it was a criminal conduct that directly harmed the U.S. And under U.S. law, that distinction matters. Normally, U.S. courts do not try foreign leaders for actions taken overseas, but U.S. law allows prosecution when alleged crimes are intended to impact the United States, like drug trafficking into the U.S. market. There is one more critical condition. The defendant must be physically in U.S. custody. Once that happens, federal courts are required to proceed with the case. This is the same legal framework used in past prosecutions of international drug traffickers. In U.S. courts, once you are in custody, the legal process starts moving fast. We know Maduro was captured during a coordinated operation involving the U.S. military and law enforcement. He was then transported out of Venezuela and brought to New York. Once he appeared before a federal judge, the case formally began. At that point, the court does not rule on how he arrived. It rules on what happens next. And this is where the case becomes legally explosive. Maduro's lawyers argue that he is a head of state and should be immune from prosecution. Maduro himself has called his detention a kidnapping and described himself as a prisoner of war. But the U.S. government rejects that claim. Why? Because the United States does not recognize Maduro as Venezuela's legitimate president, following years of disputed elections. Under U.S. precedent, head of state immunity depends on diplomatic recognition. No recognition means no automatic immunity. U.S. officials also argue that drug trafficking is not a legitimate act of government, even for recognized leaders. This case now sits at the edge of law and power. The operation and the prosecution have triggered backlash. Several countries and legal experts say the capture violated Venezuela's sovereignty and international law. Even some U.S. allies have raised concerns. The charges may be criminal, but the way Maduro was brought to court has become part of the case. Judges will now have to weigh criminal law against claims of immunity and international norms. So, why is Nicolas Maduro being tried in the United States? Because U.S. prosecutors say his alleged crimes targeted America. Because U.S. law allows prosecution once a suspect is in custody, and because the U.S. does not recognize him as a legitimate head of state. What happens next could redefine how powerful leaders are held accountable across borders.